Every woman needs to take that universal path to find self-worth, a voice, and a cherished life. That path is the heroine's journey, the roadmap to an amazing adventure that women travel to discover their true selves. The heroine's journey is not about getting on your superpowers and going out to fight the lions, tigers, and bears of the outside world with your might. That would be the hero's journey. This woman's journey is the internal journey that a woman takes to grow her courage and strength and travel to her best life. Have you hit something in your life that just rocked you? Maybe a relationship breakup, financial upset, a health consideration. Maybe it's rocked your self-worth. This truly is the start of your heroine's journey. Whether you are frozen and confused or ready for more fullness of life, join in and be illuminated about the archetypal journey that opens the full adventure of life for women to embrace. Join your host, Joan Perry, best-selling author, speaker, coach, investor, and creator of this profound work for women. She'll intimately share her own life story, as well as the stories of other heroine women in this universal quest. All are ready to guide you on your journey, to put your past into perspective, help you can take right actions now, and inspire hope for your future. This is the magic of the heroine's journey. Let's journey onward.
Hey, Joan, how you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
It's great to see you.
You too.
A funny story I wanted to share with you. This morning, I took my son on an amazing adventure. And even though we're here in Silicon Valley, we went literally through the clouds and down a 2-lane road and around and ended up at the ocean to go horseback riding. And it just brought joy to my son and I to be in nature. And it reminds us how easy it is to get off our regular journey day to day and breathe, catch a breath, spend time with family. And yet often it's very easy to find ourselves really not breathing, not enjoying time with our family or our pets or our loved ones. And so as we're talking today about the biggest mistakes, I thought that was a really interesting contrast to start the day.
Yes, I agree. Because the thing of it is, it's not that the world is against you or everything's wrong, but when it appears that everything's wrong, it's because your focus is so narrowed that you're just looking at that one thing. Because in all of our lives, there's the blue sky. You know, we're so fortunate because we're in California, there's the ocean, or, the beauty that you are witnessing. But it's that our focus narrows so much. And when it does, and we only feel, victimized, it hurts us.
It really does. And so I wanted to ask you, do heroines actually feel fear? Do they experience that? And I want you to pause there. I don't want you to answer that yet, because I think through today's conversation, we're going to hit on that from multiple perspectives and can maybe wrap up the conversation with that. But what are your thoughts on, well, let me back up a little bit. If we're going to talk about the 4 biggest mistakes today, I Googled and just did a general look at what are the 4 biggest mistakes. And I told you earlier today that even though I just typed in 4 biggest mistakes, first of all, the computer assumed I wanted to know the 4 biggest mistakes that women make. And second of all, it wanted to know the 4 biggest mistakes that women make in love. So it really pulls us in a specific direction. And I thought you might have a comment on that.
Well, as if only women make mistakes.
Yes.
And heaven forbid we know that the culture feels that way.
Yes.
So I think there is a bias towards that. And I think also women tend to look within and say, what mistake am I making? Whereas sometimes maybe you're not making a mistake, maybe the other person's got the problem, but we assume it so quickly. How can I fix it?
Yeah.
So
I see that throughout. And as we're looking deeper, of course, we can look at this through the images of love or marriage or relationship, career, self. But when you decided that there were going to be 4 key mistakes that you were going to focus on,
Hmm.
How did you narrow it down, and from what perspective were you looking?
Well, I was looking from the perspective that I was in one big freaking mess. And how was I going to get myself out of it? Because as we now know, the heroine's journey does include a big hiccup that in some way affects your life. That's most likely either in relationship, in money, in your physical health, or how you feel about yourself, what you're saying to yourself in your head. So I just looked back over what had happened and I said, you know, when I was really stuck, or I like to think of it like I'm going down the middle of the road, and I get thrown into this gutter and then I get back and then I get thrown into this gutter and then I get back. And when I looked at what threw me into the gutter, so to speak, and I asked myself, you know, where were those points where I kind of lost it? It was
Mhm.
in these four things that we outline in our book called our free ebook called The Four Mistakes Women Make. Those four things that we've included are the ones that tripped me up the most.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because just as a reminder, anybody can go to walkthejourney.com and request a free copy. So it's very simple for them to look at as well. What is the first mistake that you listed?
The first one is what we call BS beliefs. And quite frankly, that's the conversation we're having in our head about ourselves. Have you ever noticed you're like, oh, my hair's not perfect? But the five people standing in front of you, they're not saying your hair's not perfect. I have a story to tell you, and that's it. I was at the chiropractor the other day, and I was listening to him talking to one of his patients, and he was talking about the experience that he had at a growth event where they had these 50-foot telephone poles planted in the on the beach, and you had to crawl to the top of the telephone pole, then stand on top, and once you were on top, then you had to leap out for a trapeze. Now, I will tell you that we all had harnesses on, but when we're talking about our brains, it quickly forgets that you have a harness on. And he made a comment that I thought was so interesting. He said, as he was trying to figure out how to get both feet on top of this 50-foot telephone pole, he said, we make the biggest horror stories up in our brains. And we're the only one that watches the scary movie.
Yes.
And I thought that was so profound when he said it because it's true. I can picture myself at the top of that pole trying to get both feet on the top because that's what I needed to do next, thinking, "Oh my gosh, how are both of my feet gonna fit there?" And all the stuff my brain was making up, like I can't do it. I'm not strong enough. I mean, I don't know how to do it. It's just an incredible string of things that your brain has to tell you. And that's so true when we're in situations that are difficult, or we got our life got upset, or we have to manage in some way. We do have this protective mechanism in our brain that starts to make up all this stuff.
And part of it is real, right? We can see that one of the first things we learn as an infant is a fear of heights,
Yes,
right? So it is realistic to look down 50 feet and not want to fall. But
that
also, like you said, the safety harness is there. We seem to forget about the nets that we have in our life.
that's right. And the thing of it is yes, it's a survival mechanism. Yes, your brain's telling you, oh my God, something could happen here. However, you don't have any choice but to go forward.
Yeah.
In life, we generally don't get to climb back down the pole or back into the womb. We have to come up with a strategy that does get you on top where and by the way, once I got up, oh my gosh, it was a panoramic, gorgeous view of the ocean, the waves coming in. I didn't want to look down too much. I wanted to keep my focus up, like a bird. But also, I got to tell you, just to finish this story, I was so amazed that I was so solid on the top of the pole. And I think that's too what our brain forgets is that when we move forward, it's not necessarily going to be disaster. We might still be in a place where you can stand firmly, but we have to deal with the beliefs that are going on in our head. And at least for me, when life got really rough, I was like, I'm going to fall off the planet. It's not going to work. I don't know how to do this. Nobody loves me. You know, all of which may have seemed real at the time, but truthfully, they didn't help me move forward. And I had to figure out how to recreate what messages I was telling myself in a way that I could put the next foot forward because I had to take the next step.
It's interesting too, that when I was in my younger days, before having my child, I also loved those adventure experiences and team building, and some chemistry actually changed in my body when I gave birth. And all of a sudden I started experiencing a vertigo where I couldn't even go on a merry-go-round.
Right.
So different points of our life, at different points of our life, we're going to have different foundations as well on what tools we bring forward to tackle different issues.
That's true. But in our first mistake, what we're telling ourselves, and particularly anything that's interrupting, even a small step forward, we have to reframe in some fashion. Because literally, if you just sit in the middle of the road, the next car is going to come and hit you.
Yes, and it does.
And it does. So much as we have all kinds of challenges, you might have a health challenge to deal with, you might have a financial challenge, life presents these obstacles to us, which are part of the heroine's journey. But in some fashion, we have to be listening to what's going on in our head and modify any BS beliefs.
Yes, which we're going to touch on in a minute as well. I have a chicken that just came in my house. I mean, this day couldn't get any crazier. I'm trying to stay focused here and concerned about how that happened. But what I wanted to do is ask you more about each one of the three additional beliefs and then move into what we can do once we are aware of them, like how we can move past them, and what one step is that we can take just today to overcome that particular belief. So, what is the second mistake that you have?
This was my biggest one.
Okay.
Now, and I didn't see it. I didn't know that I was deficient in this area, which is, a pretty big word to use. But as the life circumstances played out, this was truly the most difficult one for me. And the second one is a broken people picker.
Oh.
So I grew up in the Midwest where everybody was supposed to like you. You were supposed to be nice and kind to everybody. You were supposed to welcome and I didn't have any filter for who came into my life or did not come into my life. I also didn't understand that there are some good people who will want to support you and love you and care for you. And by contrast, there are some people who will want to see your demise. I had no clue of that. And sometimes maybe someone's not even that obvious, but just from what they do, they hurt you in the process. And the thing of it is, on the heroine's journey, you need all the support and momentum you can get. So, on the early stages of the heroine's journey, where you're perhaps recovering or, there has been some major upset in your life, you have to discern between these types of people and make sure that the ones that are around you really support you. Because quite frankly, once I started to get this, these were the people who helped me out of the mess. Before, the other people, you've heard the expression throw you under the bus. The other people wanted to help me be in the mess, and I couldn't afford that at that time. So I really had to wake up to the fact that, my people picker was broken. And I needed to ask myself how I felt about various people in my life. Were they there to support me and be kind and help me on the journey? Or were there people I just needed to dismiss out of my life because there were some I did?
And I've learned too, there's a lot of genuinely amazing people out there who have sincere hearts. But just like me in different cycles of my life, people are in different cycles or seasons of their life. And sometimes they may be the best friend, the resource that you need. And sometimes, although it's still the same person and they have an open heart, they just can't do that or they can't comprehend what you're going through in that moment. And that's okay as part of this discernment or people picker to wrap around you the individuals that are right for you for that season and to be the right person for their season when you have the strengths to share.
Right. Remember one woman who 3 days after the ex-husband left with the girlfriend came to me and said, "He's gone. You should get over it." Well, I think she was trying to give me truth, but it wasn't, it didn't help me at that moment. I needed a little more nurturing and tenderness and kindness.
Yeah.
So if sometimes it's not that the person is necessarily bad, but they just are not helping you on the path.
In that moment. And it's okay to not even have that conversation with the person, but just not reach out to them in that period of time, to reach out to somebody else. Like you
Right.
talked in our last conversation about the angels that come up alongside us. Those are great people to pick during this time. But
Mhm.
again, the discernment may not be there.
That's right. That's right. So what I found in my own life was that my people picker was broken, and so that's why I included it as the second mistake that
Ah,
you make.
perfect. What is the third mistake?
So the third mistake is not having oomph.
Ah,
And what is oomph? Oomph is everything that makes you together and energetic and happy and capable. So, for instance, if you have no money in your checking account, that kind of diminishes your oomph a little bit. If you don't feel well, like you didn't feel well last week, you know, your oomph wasn't even enough to get out of bed.
yeah. The fever outweighed any other possibility. Yes.
Exactly. If you don't eat well and nurture your body, your oomph is going to be compromised. If you have people in your life that don't say good things about you,
Mm.
your oomph is going to be compromised. So it's all about taking a look at everything around you and saying, does this all add up for my life force energy? And that's a word I love because it's not health only, it's not love only. It's like, how does it all add up so that you are as fully resourced with oomph as you possibly can be?
Oh, we all need that. Like
Yeah,
a blanket or a hug with us all the time.
yeah. Yeah, I've been saying to myself lately, Joan, you need to think about what you're eating
Oh,
because it's what I'm eating right now isn't necessarily oomph producing. So, in one or another of these, we all have to make adjustments. But when you really go through that rocky stage, which is the start of the heroine's journey,
mm-hmm.
that's when you need oomph the most. If you're sailing along a little bit as you get down onto the further steps, maybe you can have a little less oomph for a day or two or a week. Like, last week was not your greatest week.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in the early stages, when you've hit the first and second steps of the heroine's journey and you trying to get yourself out of a mess like I was and like you were, you need all the oomph you can get then.
Yeah, absolutely. That, yes. What is the fourth mistake you listed?
The fourth one, gosh, I wandered around in the wilds for so long.
Yeah.
I did not realize that there were wise women before me who actually had determined how to get themselves out of messes and go on to a better life. When you're in the mess, you look around and you think, this is all there is, and it's not going to improve. But what I love about, I'm just going to pick one that we all know, which is Oprah. she's told us her stories about going through very difficult times. And at the same time, every time that she's gone through a difficult time, she also tells us about how it got better once she got through that.
Correct.
So, what I saw as I went through all this was the heroine's journey. It was the blessing that was bestowed upon me, the 13 steps that we need to take to actually start the journey of me, the journey of you, the journey of it's a process that we all take, that all women must take to become their best selves. And as you go through it, and I definitely say this now, looking back on my life, I wouldn't trade where I am today to go back to where I was before all the messiness. First of all, I look back and I know one thing very distinctly. In the messiness, I got my freedom.
Yes. Yes. But I think as we talked about the other day as well, that in the messiness isn't necessarily when we realize we got our freedom.
No, we don't realize it at the time. But when you look back, you see it caused me to not cling to lots of things. It caused me to make change. It caused me to be flexible. It caused me to think maybe I'm not who I think I am or everything I think I am. There was newfound freedom in that messiness.
Yeah.
And what I came to understand is that we all have different stories. Each of our stories is unique, but we have the same plot line of the steps to take. And so that was a long way to say that the fourth mistake is not understanding that there's a heroine's journey. And I didn't get to know that when I was in all that. I had to look back and figure it out. But once we know it now, whether it's Oprah or Eleanor Roosevelt or other heroines that we can point to, they went through a process, different stories, but they went through a process. And if I'd known that process back then, like I do now, it could have made it so much easier.
It would have. And I see that as the core foundation of family is being disrupted right now. You used to be able to go to your grandparents' house and spend time with your parents and have family dinners together. And then you'd, excuse me, you'd have little cousins around with you. But the generational support was the generation support is what gave us hope, because we could look to the generation before us and see that, wait, at 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, life still continues and it can be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And at 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, you can look back at 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 15 and see, wow, all that energy is coming up and guide and share the wisdom. So both sides of this help show that there is something over that horizon. And as you mentioned, whatever we're in the middle of right now, this too shall pass. Right. And we know it will pass because it is a journey. And in this case, it's a heroine's journey. But there's many people who have come before us who have paved that path and laid the foundation so that we can take one step at a time as well and know that it will be okay.
Right. And if I had a magic wand, I might use it to make my life perfect.
Oh,
just because it would be easier and I could sit on the couch and eat bonbons and, and linger in my rose garden. But that's just not the way it works. Each one of us from time to time is challenged. And then the question is, how do we deal with those challenges? How do we resource ourselves so that we have the oomph and the knowledge and the skills to get ourselves to go onward? And you said something really important, and that's that the heroine's journey has to include hope. Now, when I got into the worst part of my life, okay, when I just thought I was going to fall off the planet, and there was this big cavernous, boiling something that was going to, take me, um, my hope got diminished. But the heroine's journey will give you the next step. And embracing hope on that is very, very important.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you know, I always say that the one thing that I'm most grateful for is that I have something that I can see gratitude. And it isn't a gratitude for this or that or anything else, but it's just that at the beginning of each day, I actually know and I can feel that gratitude, which is a hope.
Right, right. It's the ability to see that blue sky you're talking about.
Yes.
It's, even if your day was funky, or let's just say, last week it was funky for you because you didn't feel well. However, your hope and your belief caused you to look at the beauty that surrounded you today and say, whatever, you know, there is still beauty and love and kindness and generosity. When I went through the worst part of life for me, I, I got so narrowly focused that I thought there was none of that,
Oh,
and yet I lived 10 minutes from the beach when I could have, but I didn't know to do it until later. Gotten in my car, went for a walk on the beach, you know, you know, played with a dog, just a number of things
yeah.
that will bring you back to that sense of hope and joy in life.
It's an easy way to really reset our minds, but when our minds are so weighed down with the fear that we're going to talk about more in a minute, or the overwhelm, or the hurt, or the pain, that sofa is a safety zone. And
Yeah.
stepping outside of a front door really becomes challenging. I remember I've gone through a few strokes in my life. And so for me, there's been points where I have stood by the front door for hours and not been able to go outside because it was too hard for me to figure out how to turn the handle, or did I have everything I needed? It was the normal thoughts that we just take for granted of, yes, let's get from here to the car and go, were just running so slow for me. And it was an absolute paralysis that I was dealing with.
And what I would say as one of the four mistakes was that your mistake at the time was not enough oomph.
Yeah, it wasn't. No.
You were not resourced enough that you had the oomph that you needed to go do the day. You
Yeah.
know, and maybe that meant just crawling back in bed for a nap.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Or me.
maybe, yeah, or maybe it meant there was somebody in your life who was not saying nice and kind things to you that just needed to go, but it is that oomph.
Yeah. So we've gone through each one of the four mistakes right now, and we both have points where they've affected our life, just like it's affected so many individuals. And I know we really want to spend some time on BS beliefs. And you've talked about the people picker and really having discernment in that area. And then, of course, you talked about not having the and then understanding the heroine's journey and that there are women who have gone through this before us. What I'd like to do today is offer for myself and also maybe anybody that's listening a chance to understand beyond just the recognition of where we are or how it attaches or affects us in our life, what is just one step we can do today to get past that? We can be aware of it, and then what's one step we can suggest in each one? So let's start with the first one.
Yes, please. So th- this is this is something I feel so strongly about, and that is find yourself, whether it's in your own bookshelf or whether it's at the local stationery store or whether it's at Target. Go buy yourself a beautiful book that you simply dedicate to your own writings,
Mm.
a journal. Okay. Open that journal and put a date on it. And for the next week, write down as best you can everything you hear yourself tell yourself about yourself that is not supportive. So that might mean you're putting your jeans on and you go, oh, I'm too fat. Okay. That might mean, oh, I'm not loved. It might mean, oh, gee, I'm so grateful. Um, but write down particularly the negative ones,
Okay.
because it's the negative ones that are the BS beliefs. Okay? Like, who came up with the notion that you just had to be a certain weight? You know? I mean, I loved it. I went to South Africa recently, and the women there have these lovely, voluptuous boobs and these big butts. And I was so amazed to watch them because they were so proud in their bodies.
And Joan, I remember they would share recipes with you too, because they were so proud of how they created the beautiful shape that they lived in. It was just
Exactly.
amazing.
Exactly. And I was sitting having breakfast and I saw this one woman walk by and I thought, you're large, because I was looking at from my own standards, you know. And then it made me laugh because the woman who walked by behind her was larger, you know, but she strutted, you know, with these, and she was very voluptuous. So whoever makes up these standards, you know, so if you write down in your journal everything that you're saying to yourself that handicaps yourself and create some awareness around that, that would be the first step. Now,
Okay. So in this first one, let me say that and then we'll continue on the next step. But in BS beliefs, we need to pause and recognize what the beliefs are. And you and I have had conversations as well, and I need to go deeper because the surface beliefs have a core belief behind it that I'm not even realizing is behind that because I'm still at the surface of gathering data and trying to figure out how it applies. But in this case, if I take a journal for 1 week and write down all the thoughts pertaining to myself, so my self thoughts related to my own identity and how I'm showing up and how I feel about myself and everything that comes up, but especially even though don't want to focus our lives on the negative, in this case, write down the negative so I can see it as a reflection, then I can be aware of the self talk I am feeding myself.
yeah, that's the whole point.
Okay.
It's it's the beginning step of hearing the self-talk that you're doing with yourself. So if you're in a mess right now and you're saying to yourself, you know, I'm not strong enough, I'm not capable enough, you know, any of that we all know too well, um, that's the first step in understanding that that BS belief, what you're telling yourself, is not going to help you take the next step. And so then what is the next part where we begin to deal with that?
Okay. All right. So that's part A. Is there part B of that one?
No, I think that's good for today. As
Okay.
you know, we teach in the heroine's journey how to change those BS beliefs,
Mhm.
because a heroine says good things to herself about herself.
How
So
beautiful that is.
when I hear myself do that, I have a delete key, like a delete key on a keyboard,
Mhm.
and I'm just like delete, you know, so that is a quick mechanism for being able to undo that. And it makes me laugh. And sometimes I even yell it out loud, like if I'm in the middle of a grocery store, you know, I'll be like, delete. And everybody turns around and looks at me, and I laugh, and it completely changes things.
That's powerful to catch ourselves in it. Often we'll blame other people for upsetting our moods or putting us on, but a lot of it is so ingrained at this point that we can really see the reflection in that activity. Okay, on to the next one, people picker. What is a recognition and also an activity somebody can do today around that?
So I would say for that one,
Cancel all the friends? No, I'm kidding.
yeah, exactly. For that one, it's sort of the same as the first one, and that's to become aware. So when you're with people, start to become aware of how they make you feel. If you're with somebody and you feel more energetic, you have more oomph when you walk away from them, okay, that's a good choice. But if you're with somebody who continually takes you into their drama, or, you know, has unkind things to say about you, you know, that diminishes you.
Mm.
And so start to develop that internal radar from my childhood, that had been dismantled. And that's a whole nother discussion that we'll have at some point. But now I'm very aware of my need to pay attention to who makes me feel good and who doesn't. And it's caused me to make some entirely different, to hang around people I probably wouldn't have hung around with before. Because now I don't just look at it from the outside, like, how you look or any of that stuff or where do you go. I look at it from the inside, which is when I'm in your company, how does it feel? And if you're brave, you can note those experiences in your journal too.
Okay, so how do people make you feel when they're around you, or also when they've left you? A lot of times there's a loss or a longing because that connection wasn't complete. And so we think that, oh, that's love, or that's a relationship, or that's a friendship, when in fact that person wasn't fully giving, and the missing was knowing that there wasn't really something there. So we're misunderstanding the signal.
I pay attention to, is this a person I can have a heart connection with? Because a heart connection person will have more commitment to you. They'll want to reach out and be more compassionate. They'll want to help you more. So you shouldn't be surprised if it's a person that doesn't connect to the heart, that when you need something, they're not there. They're not connected that way.
Okay, so that's excellent. Now, what about the next one? Not having
Mm.
What do we do to recognize that? And maybe specifically around 3 o'clock every afternoon? How do we push through that?
I would say that the number one thing for oomph, and there's so much publicity about now, is sleep.
Oh,
Women need 8 to 9 hours of sleep. It's the number one thing that you can do for your body. When you sleep, your brain cleanses, your clarity comes sharper, your logic is better. The point of it is that not enough sleep can have a severe impact on your ability to function, to control your emotions, to come up with the next step, all kinds of things.
interesting. And it just affects us in so many ways. If nothing else, our emotional strength on how we're able to look at something in the moment when the unknown pops up or unexpected pops up.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And that's good sleep. That's not putting your cell phone under your pillow, making your brain, get agitated with the news or something else before you go to sleep. That's making your bed real cozy and comfortable so that you just kind of sink into it and just feel like, oh, thank you, I'm here, you know. So it's all that kind of stuff that leads to our really good sleep.
Oh. And it's so simple and it's free too.
Exactly.
So I'm loving the conversation we're having today. Really, that brings us back to the reality of what we all face. And we're all going through it on one level or another. But when we started this conversation, not only did I share the amazing adventure I had this morning, literally going through a cloud and a windy road and opening up to the ocean and listening to the birds and the waves and just really enjoying nature and all the gifts that are there. But I also asked you a question. Do heroines feel fear? I want to get a little bit more on the activity from you before for each one of the mistakes. And then I'm going to ask you that again as we wrap this up. But what we left off the last one on, we talked about the BS beliefs and a way to journal through that. We also talked about being a better people picker. Boy, that's a mouthful. And possibly even journaling that as well to relate and identify how people make us feel when we're with them and when there's a distance or a separation there, whether or not it's, and we didn't use this word, but in society we know codependency and dependency around that. Is it natural and fun and joyful, or is there something there that maybe just isn't a fit? The next one I wanted to look at was the third belief, having the And we talked about the life force energy, which, as you mentioned, is just a beautiful terminology of what we're describing. That isn't just health or love or it's everything wrapped up into one. What can somebody do to move through this a bit or grab onto that especially when they don't even know that they don't have it?
Well, sleep is the key.
But I'm wondering, as I mentioned, that 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and now what time is it that we're recording? It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? People feel that little bit of lag, and they often don't realize it. It's some people will go have a cup of coffee or go for another stimulant. Some people will go for a walk around this period of time. But as we're journaling or looking at the other activities, by looking at different times of their day, is there any way to also look at possibly seeing when their own may be triggered or drip a little bit, or we know we have biorhythms? Is there any talk of that in the Zoom?
Well, that's why I love a journal, because you can definitely record your life force energy and ask yourself, am I trying to run my life at 2 or 4? When if I step back and took a look at what I could do to improve my life, I might live my life at an 8 or a 9. That's why I mentioned to you that as I look at my own situation right now, I have to say to myself, you have to improve your diet.
Yeah.
And, I generally get around to that at the first of the year, but for some reason this year, like I just am ignoring it. Like we're just, but if I really want to do the things I want to do this year, then it's imperative that I get my oomph level up, to 8, 9, it's one thing I'm doing that I'm really enjoying is I've been taking Pilates classes and I can feel that I'm getting stronger and that's adding to my oomph. So, I think in your journal, it's great to record where you are on all of these things, be it beliefs, how you're picking the people in your life, the oomph, and now we're going to go to number 4.
Excellent. And thank you for digging deeper on that one too. Sometimes sleep just gets set aside, or the food we eat, we think of not necessarily a resource, but just something we just do. And it's amazing how much it fuels us. So yes, number 4. So you talked about the heroine's journey on this one. What can somebody do today to recognize where they're at and what activity they can do to just take one step?
So the mistake is not knowing the path. When I didn't know what the next step was, and I didn't realize I hadn't completed the last step, and I didn't see this universal plot line that everybody from Oprah to Eleanor Roosevelt to you and to me go through, I was wandering around in the wilds, just blind. So, of course, the step on that one is we want to tell you all about it. So, it's not understanding the path. And first, we've outlined for you the 4 mistakes that, women make. And the 4th mistake invites you to start to discover the path. Start to discover the heroine's journey. Start to discover that you're on it. Start to acknowledge that whatever crisis or upset caused you to be on it, that it's not necessarily a bad thing. I know it's hard to grasp that early on, but if you start to understand the heroine's journey and the path that you're on, it'll put it in perspective. Your past will make more sense. In the present, you'll know what steps to take next, and your future will have hope. And these are all the things we want for you, because the heroine's journey is about finding your courage and your strength and having the resources you need to get through. Yeah. So the heroine's journey, understanding it, it's why I've done this work. It's why I'm so passionate about it. It's why when I learned it, I had to share it, because I don't want women to wander around in the wilds. I want us to be strong and to contribute. And for goodness sakes, the world needs our voices right now. So please, for mistake number 4 is not understanding the path. We prepared the 4 mistakes book for you that you can get free on our website. You just go to walkthejourney.com. You'll see it right in the middle of the page. You can put your email in right there and we'll send it directly to your email and you can download it and take a walk through.
Excellent. And I believe right there on the walkthejourney.com site is where you have the journey map too. I think that's where I saw it.
I think so too.
Yeah, so anybody can grab an image there and really see visually what each step looks like along the path and understanding that unless we know what the destination is going to look like, we can pass it by. We may not know when we've arrived, but the heroine's journey map you created, it's just a great visual to go along with the teaching. So I want to go back, Joan. It's ridiculous to think that we don't feel fear. Everybody feels fear at some level. But the heroine's journey is really about overcoming that fear. So I think the question is very genuine. Does a heroine actually feel fear?
I would not even use the word overcome.
Oh.
I think fear and anger and other emotions are valid human emotions. Mm-hmm. The real question is, does fear stop you in your tracks? Therefore, you sit in the middle of the road, potentially getting hit by the next car that comes up. The journey of the heroine's journey is to develop your inner resources and your self-worth. Okay. So that the next time something comes up and you feel that fear, because fear is a warning signal, it's saying, pay attention. There's something going on. It could be potentially, problematic. Mm-hmm. But from that point, once you're on the heroine's journey and you're going through the steps and you're developing the inner structure of you, you come to that fear with new internal resources, a stronger sense of self-worth. You're able to deal with whatever the circumstances are more effectively. And you don't just sit in the middle of the road. You continue to take a step forward. And you know that it's okay even to take a small step forward. Mm-hmm. But in your journal, when you're looking at where you are with a certain circumstance and you ask yourself, am I making progress? Your fear's not stopping you. And we'll have more discussions as we go forward in all the things we're going to talk about, how fear can actually help you. I mean, it seems like a striking concept, but we talk about this in all the material for the heroine's journey. And by the way, I'm going to have a new book out shortly, which is
very soon. Yeah.
And we talk about how fear can actually be a motivator. It can help you. It can teach you. So I wouldn't want to disable fear in any of us. Heroines have fear because after all, you feel when you're a heroine sometimes, and when life has come along and made major upset to you, sometimes you feel like you're standing on the top of a cliff. And you have to decide what's your next step. Mm-hmm. You're fearful. You can't just stay at the top of the cliff. You have to decide to put your wings on and fly, which is the heroine's journey. And you certainly don't want to roll off that cliff and onto the crashing rocks of the sea below. Mm-hmm. So that's what we want to avoid. And so fear can motivate you to put your wings on.
It's a great summary. Okay, so today we went through each one of the 4 mistakes that you've identified. We've talked about not only what they mean and how they impact us, but we've given some quick steps or opportunities just using a basic journal that somebody can start to be more aware of their own way that they're relating to themselves or to the world around them or the people in their lives, and start to notice patterns as they engage and start moving through the heroine's journey. Is there anything else you want to add?
there's just so much to talk about. Thanks for joining us today for this podcast. Barbara and I are looking forward to many more, because not only do we want to have this conversation with you, but we have fun doing it, because
Absolutely.
there's so much that we learn in the process too. We are choosing to be heroines of our own life. And I can tell you that that makes for a much better, happier, more joyful, freer life with
Yes,
prosperity and all the things that we dream of. But to
absolutely.
realize our dreams, we need to take the heroine's journey. So thanks for being with us. We'll be back next week, where we'll be talking about the steps of the heroine's journey.
That is this week's episode of The Heroine's Journey. You can access the blog post for this episode, along with other great resources, at walkthejourney.com. Also, get your free ebook at walkthejourney.com so you can say goodbye to just surviving and turn into thriving. Join us next week for another fun, inspiring, and uplifting episode. If you love this episode, feel free to subscribe and give us a review on iTunes. Stay in touch on other social media platforms, Instagram and our Facebook group, both at The Heroine's Journey LLC. Until next time.